This meeting.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and record this. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the nuts and bolts. First of all, starting off with our syllabus, some of the things that we're going to be taking a look at. Obviously, the most important thing is that you found your way here, and that you're in the right place at relatively the right time. And so that is kind of the important thing. So let's go ahead and take a look, first of all, at the nuts and bolts of what we're taking a look at. So my name is Mark Heffer. I'm going to be your tour guide for the rest of the semester. And you can reach me at my email, which is mheffley, without the E on it, msu denver.edu. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. First of all, before we get too deep into the nuts and bolts, I just kind of want to give you a little bit of background about kind of where I come from and what I've sort of been doing. So this is the first time that I have taught in this room. I've taught AMP for over almost 17 years now. And so this is an opportunity to teach for Metro. And so I have a long history of both AMP1 and AMP2. Typically, whenever you take a look at an instructor, in terms of AMP instructors in particular, oftentimes they have kind of a bit of an emphasis, like a little bit of a slant, if you will. And you're usually like an anatomy person. And so we kind of think of those people as sort of like the chiropractors of the world, the exercise physiologists of the world. So you're dealing kind of in musculoskeletal types of systems and things of that nature. And so oftentimes you tend to be very sort of anatomical in the way you think and do things. And then there's the other half. There's physiology people who tend to sort of really get excited about like all of the regulation and control and the chemical nature of how the systems work. Now, typically speaking, AMP1 is generally pretty heavy on anatomy because of just by virtue of the fact that we have the skeletal system and the muscular system in the first half. And oftentimes AMP2 tends to be very physiological. Now, if you're kind of wondering which side of that fence I lean on, I'm very much a physiology person. And there's a lot of physiology in AMP1. Don't get me wrong. It's not like there's no physiology in here. It's a little bit more limited to, like, say, muscle and neural physiology. Whereas in AMP2, pretty much you're doing physiology like every week for the entire semester, right? So there's no let up on that one. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of kind of where some of my emphasis is, kind of where some of my leanings are. Good. Okay, so we're in. And so that's basically kind of where I come from. Now, one thing, Metro hasn't been using cats for a little while. They've been using mink. This semester, we're moving into using cats for AMP1, which is actually what I've mostly worked with. Minks are greasy little creatures that aren't fun at all to work with. Cats are a little bit easier to deal with. And we kind of have a little bit of a reasoning associated with that. Oftentimes when you're working with cats, it's a little bit of how should we say, kind of getting used to it, right? Because I mean, obviously, if you've got a cat at home, it's a little bit of a shock to work on cats, and it kind of takes a little bit of kind of getting used to a little bit. I understand that, but cats are the best system to use for AMP purposes, and so we're switching back to cats, and then AMP2 will be going back to cats in spring. Because they are the better way to study anatomy. They're closer to us than mink are by far. So if you want to get a hold of me, typically on Tuesdays, I'm pretty much here all day long. I start my classes at 9, and you guys are my last class, so till 9:30. So almost a pretty long day. So if I'm kind of babbling incoherently by the end of the evening, just go with it. It's probably been a harder day than usually, but usually it's not that bad. It's not like I'm not used to doing like courses. If you're pre-health, then you're also kind of aware of the fact that long hours are kind of par for the course a lot of times. So it kind of comes to turf. If you want to give me a call, you certainly can. So this is my office number. Now, my main gig, I'm an affiliate with Metro, have been since 2007. My main gig, my full-time gig, is with CCD downstairs. And I pretty much teach everything from general bio to AMP to genetics to micro to everything. So this office number is my CCD office, and it'll ring in there. And if I'm in there, I'll answer. If I'm not, I'm not a lot of times because I'm in classes most of the time. Leave a message. It will record your message and it'll email the WAV file to me. And I'll be able to hear that message, even if I'm not on campus. Like if you email me and it's like a Friday or something like that, I'll still be able to hear your message if you call that number and use that number. Okay. So that's a good source. The office number, which is actually the bio office 2042, I just list that generically because we kind of hopefully we all know where the bio office is. Maybe not. Something like kind of it's up there somewhere. So if you want to use office hours, you're more than welcome to. Typically, I list office hours as by appointment, and that's not intended to be a put off. It's not like, oh, okay, just good luck finding me. By appointment, doctors are that way, right? So, oh yeah, just make an appointment for me whenever. And it's like that whenever happens to be like 12 years out or something like that. It's not like that. I've got plenty of room and time in the week. It's just a matter of how our schedules match up. So when I say by appointment, all I just want to do is just let's compare schedules, figure out a good time, and then we can get that on the calendar. And that's usually a little bit more efficient. That's a whole lot more efficient than just putting in drop-in hours that are never used. Because when you just have a block of hours there, nobody shows up. So for me, it's kind of a big, I don't say it's a waste of time, but it is. I mean, if I'm just sitting in the office forever and just be like, isn't it gonna show up? And nobody ever does. I tend to do other things. I tend to find other things to do. And so usually if you need office hours, it's a little more efficient to just kind of make, set down a time and compare schedules. And that way I know that you're coming and I expect you and I can make sure I settle myself down so I can take care of you guys. Okay. So lecture, which is kind of a little bit of a curveball for some of you guys. And that's okay because it is a little different, right? So our lecture is actually asynchronous online. It's a hybrid course, which basically means a portion of it is online and a portion of it is a face-to-face. Of course, our labs are the face-to-face portion. And our Tuesday evenings are going to be face-to-face as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that. It's optional for the most part on Tuesdays, with the exception of our exams. Our exams will be in-house on our lecture days on Tuesdays. So you want to make sure that you're able to be here for those lecture exams. One thing I hate the most is trying to rig an exam for online delivery. It almost never goes well because it's essentially just unpoliceable, it's unproctorable, and it's the integrity of that exam is pretty thin. I still have yet to see an online exam that's actually worth its weight compared to an in-house exam. And the problem is, guess what? When you go to programs, it's not going to all be online. You're going to actually have to know something in person. Patients notoriously do not like telehealth, which means you're going to have to know what you're doing with a real person in front of you, right? And so it's all face-to-face. And for that piece, it is. For the lecture, it's optional. And the reason it's optional on Tuesday for us is because we have lab like 15 minutes after the lecture period ends. So if you're like at home in your fuzzy bunny slippers, just chilling and zooming in, you've got like 15 minutes to get here in time for lab. I don't know about you guys, but I live in Southeast Denver. That's not going to happen. So most of us, I realize, are probably already on campus somewhere at 5 o'clock. And if you prefer to be here in kind of more of a classical setting while we're kind of going over material, then I've made the space available. Okay. If you like a chance, just choose to be on Zoom because you want to go sit in a park or something like that, and just kind of zen a little bit while you're going through the lecture before you show up because you're just a few minutes away, that's also fine. Okay, so it's optional. I just provide this space for those of you who are already here and you just want to settle down and kind of do the kind of typical class thing. That's what's called a HyFlex. So it's like a broadcast combination audience of in-person and online. And so that'll always be in this room. On Thursdays, it's all remote. So it'll all be by Zoom. So if you show up here, the room will be empty. If you're looking for me, I will not be here because I will be at home, Zooming in and doing the lecture from the comfort of my home. Okay. So that's a little bit of kind of a combination. So a little bit of online stuff, a little bit of face-to-face stuff. By the way, if you guys have any questions about the structure or the nature of the course, just chime in. Let me know. If you're online, feel free to unmic and just blast in. If you're here, just feel free to just jump in. Okay, anytime you want. Okay, now let's talk about the textbook. Now, this is going to be, there's two textbooks actually. So the first one is Seeley's Anatomy and Physiology. And this one you want to get, they have it in the bookstore bundled together with Connect. And Connect is something you're going to need because that's going to be our publisher's platform that we're going to be using to do all of our homeworks and things of that nature on. And so there's going to be a lot of resources in that particular platform that we're going to make use of. And so you want to make sure that you get either in the bookstore, the bundle associated with that, or on Canvas, I've posted a Connect link that has the Connect link that you would need to register for the class that I set up for us. Okay, so if you use that one, then you would also be able to get the textbook with that Connect platform. Typically, whenever you use that link, it'll give you 3 different options. It'll allow you to buy the e-text with Connect. And some of you may like that because it's easy and portable and you can carry that with wherever you are without having a big, massive book on you. You can either do a loose leaf, like a 3-ring binder loose leaf version with Connect. And I think they also have a rental option with Connect. Notice the common denominator. All of it has Connect, right? So that's an important piece that you want to make sure you lock in. So if you're jumping on Amazon and you want to buy it, beware, because a lot of times Amazon is not selling the textbooks with Connect and you have to have the Connect. Or if it's from a secondary vendor, oftentimes what will happen is somebody will have used the book bundle, they'll have used the Connect, so they have Connect, but it's completely useless for you because they've already spent that access. So beware of where you get it from. If you get it directly from the publisher, or if you get it from the bookstore, you should be okay. No, Connect is tethered to the actual text because the Connect platform itself is the things that they have on there are actually loaded with the content from the textbook. So they can't really do a Connect platform without having all that textbook material in it. So it's just kind of like intertwined together. So typically speaking, if you're looking for the cheapest option by far would be the e-text with Connect. That's typically the cheapest one. It's also the most portable. So you can pull that up anytime, but people have different preferences. And some of you may want a good AMT book for your library. So you want the hardbound book, and I understand that. So you can do that. Just make sure that you get the Connect along with it. Okay. So the other one is going to be your lab manual. And so the lab manual is actually written by Maria, who's awesome. Different publisher. Maria herself is a textbook writer. She's been a textbook writer forever. And this is basically the manual that she writes. This is like almost like a textbook in its own right. This is like by far the best lab manual on the face of the planet. It's like equal parts textbook end lab manual. I mean, it is stout and really, really good resource. I mean, I love Merriam. I love this manual, but because it's like equal parts textbook, it's going to be a little pricey, right? So same thing in this particular case. When you get the textbook, I believe this is also going to be at the bookstore as well. They'll have bundled in it. This is a different publisher, Pearson, and they have a different platform, Mastering AMP. And I believe they have a digital version of this as well that is usually a little cheaper than this guy here. But this, you'll want to get a hold of this lab manual. That's the reason why I say, go cheap, go as cheap as possible, because you have two really top flight sources here in Merriam's manual paired with Seeley's Anatomy and Physiology. That is like the top of the top when it comes to these sources. Okay, so this is what we're going to be working with as we go through lab. And this is going to give you a ton of support when it comes to working through the labs. Some of the best images are in this book that I love. This is actually the lab manual that I use for our CCD students in AMP. So it's an excellent manual. And so you'll want to go ahead and jump on either the bookstore or you can jump on the Pearson website, and you could probably get it directly from there as well. Okay. Yes, there's multiple versions, right? So she has fetal pig, she has cat, she has human cadaver. You want to get the cat version, okay? Because that's what we're going to be switching to. Because otherwise it'll be like, okay, wait a minute, I got like mink or a fetal pig, and it's like, so because she has like in here. Okay, that's a little creepy. I didn't realize the shades in this building were automatic. At least I hope that is. Otherwise, somebody that I can't see just hit the button behind me. Alrighty then. Anyway, first time ever that that's ever happened. I've taught in this building for years. I've never had those shades go up on their own. So that's why it's a little creepy. But anyway, so it's really great. Make a stop at the bookstore and check out the resources. Again, for cost effectiveness, check out the McGraw-Hill link and do some frugal shopping. Okay, so make sure you get a good deal for your money, because obviously nobody has a lot of money to just spend out there for just infinitely, right? Okay.
The same tips used for the second part of the AMP.
Yeah, it's actually two parts, because the actual books themselves, like the first half of this is AMP1, and then all the visceral systems like cardiovascular, respiratory, that's all the back half. Same thing is true for Seeley. The first half of the book is typically what you'd cover in AMP1. The second half of the book is what you'd cover in AMP2, which is good, because that basically means that when you get Connect, it should last for both semesters, which is, you're paying a lot of money up front, but you get two classes of value out of it. Okay. So our Connect registration, this is just kind of like an explanation, kind of like a little video explanation of Connect itself. So you can either get these through your two different options, either through your bookstore, so basically using this ISBN information to get it through your bookstore, or you can get it from the McGraw-Hill website. For instance, the link that I have is from the site that I set up for our particular class that you would be going into, and so that should take you to this this location. Okay, so in order to get a hold of this, one thing that you'll also run into, and that I've been noticing from my earlier classes that are using McGraw-Hill texts, is when you go to the Connect. Where is my class? No. I think this was it. Okay. So when you go to the Connect link, it'll take you to a registration screen, and one of the options it gives you is this 14-day temporary access. It's free access for 14 days. The reason why McGraw-Hill does that is, and usually what I've been seeing is they have two options: 14-day access or if you've got an access code, you can drop it in there and you can go ahead and get it set up. That's like if you buy the book bundle in the bookstore and they give you the access code for that and you can just use that. Now, the 14-day temporary access is designed to sort of dodge that financial aid bullet, because oftentimes financial aid won't kick in for a few weeks. And so it kind of makes book buying a little tricky. So they kind of give you like an umbrella period to sort of get you functional in the classroom, give you a chance to sort of get that financial aid to kick in. And then once that kicks in, then they'll notify you typically that, okay, your 14-day trial period is over. Now you got to make a decision about purchasing. Okay. And of course, you're staying in the class. The answer to that is yes, you need to purchase, because otherwise it's going to erase everything you did. And so that's not a good thing, right? Because you'd be kind of starting over, and that's not good. However, after 14 days, if you decide, yeah, no, I'm out, no, totally not, I'm not taking this class right now, then it's kind of no harm, no foul. It won't be, and you can kind of just bow out. So that's kind of what it's designed to do, is to kind of create a little bit of an umbrella for that initial period. Technical problems, which oftentimes there are. So we have an 800 number from McGraw-Hill. Oftentimes their student tech support is a necessary call, because a lot of times students come to me with all these different issues and I'm like, I don't know. I didn't write the program and I don't have any like power or authority to like turn all the buttons on and the switches on that they do, because it's their program and it's their platform. So there's some things that I can maybe help out with, like pop-up blockers or something like that. That's probably a common one. People be like, nothing's coming up. That's because you got to turn your pop-up blockers off to allow the program to function properly. But otherwise, more technical issues, especially with registration, you probably have to contact student support for that one. So after you register, then you should be able to have access to the site, and you should be able to see all of the materials that we have set up in there for our work. Okay. So we have our course description, which basically is pretty simple. We're essentially going to be covering the anatomy physiology of the first half of the textbook, which leads us all the way up to the nervous system. So we'll be covering kind of the basics, so kind of the intro, tissues, and then we'll start moving into skeletal, both anatomy and physiology, muscular anatomy and physiology, neural anatomy and physiology, and then that's going to be our semester. And then typically in AMP2, you're going to be starting off with endocrine usually, and then moving through the core visceral systems. Okay, so our prereq is going to be 1080, which is General Bio 1, and 1090. So that tells me you guys have had lab before, and you survived. Congratulations. You represent the survivors, right? So that's good, because actually one of the lab exercises we have for tonight is basically a review from 1090. Which, if you got through 1090, should be very familiar to you and shouldn't really require a whole lot of extra time on your part, other than just a minor dusting off and sort of kicking off a little bit of the rust, perhaps. Okay. Some of the more important links that we're going to have. So first of all, probably the most important link, there's going to be a lot of stuff that I'm going to be setting up in Canvas under the module segment. And so for typically each chapter, I'm going to be setting up a module with various information. Like right now, we've got, I think, the syllabus and the class and all that sort of stuff that's in there. All the basic nuts and boltsy stuff that's in there. So as we start moving forward, I'm going to start divvying those guys up by chapter. And of course, by chapter, as we run into resources, those links are going to be posted in that module as we run into them. One that you're going to see commonly is obviously the PowerPoints that we're working on. So you should expect to see those popping up as soon as we start digging into the actual chapter material, along with the recorded lectures. So I will be recording all of the lectures as we kind of go through them, so that if you guys miss anything, you can always go back and re-review them. Those will be posted as YouTube links because nobody has a problem with YouTube access. It's a platform that is nearly universal. Doesn't matter if you're using an iPhone or an Android, or if you're using Chromebook or whatever, nobody has a problem typically with YouTube, which is the reason why I use it. Okay, so those will be posted after we get done for the most part on those modules, and you'll kind of see those popping up. then that's for you guys to just sort of go back and re-graze on it. You know, it is an evening class, and if you've had a long day, it can be difficult on your concentration at times. And so there may be times where it's like, you know what, I was just so tired that night. I have no idea what just happened to me. I just lived through it, and I got to go back and now review what I just did, right? So that kind of gives you a chance to sort of go back and kind of give that a few more reps if you need that. In addition, as we collect some sites and things like that for labs, I'll also be posting those as well. And so those will be listed also under the individual modules themselves. So our basic outline, you can see is pretty standard. So there's going to be our lecture outline of all the different things we're going for. So we're going to be covering all these different ideas. And of course, in the lab, we're going to have the different goals that we're going to be looking for. So for instance, taking a look at skills in dissection. Dissection is a required component of AMP. So we do have to do some sort of a dissection exercise associated with that. Identification and things of that nature of the muscular, skeletal, and nervous systems. So all those are objectives of the lab itself. Now, instruction-wise, the instruction here is largely going to be lecture presentation, recorded lecture presentation. And so the idea is expecting that you'll have all of your materials and everything that you need for that lecture. Depending on what you do, every student is different. First of all, one of the things that you might want to consider bringing to class in terms of your preparation is your preferred digital devices. Some of you like tablets or laptops or whatever you want. I would encourage you to bring those. Oftentimes students will have the PowerPoints up. Some students will just take the notes right there as they're going through the lecture. Other students prefer to just kind of write it on kind of a blank notepad, kind of tablet, like a notepad recorder, and that's fine too. So every student has kind of their own sort of way of doing things. And so however you want to do it, bring it all, right? So bring all of your technology to bear, use it all to your advantage. I'm a big fan of technology. And so I kind of expect you guys to bring that with you as well. And so the PowerPoints will all, like I said, will all be posted on Canvas, so you can have them ahead of time and you can take a look at those. If you need to print those off, you will have to consult your printing sources, your computer labs and things like that. I typically do not use hard copies unless there's something that we need to work with, like in lab or something like that. Sometimes I'll add something in there, but most of it I try to keep digital because that's more accessible for us. I don't know about you guys, but man, paper is hard to keep track of. If it's all on your device, it's all right there. You don't have to do anything with it. It's all, you just hit a button and boom, it's right there. Okay. So I try to keep it as digital as possible by either posting it on Canvas or something like that. It's like, even if it's a hard copy, chances are there's going to be a copy of that on Canvas as well, okay, for you guys to access. So classroom policies, the ugly stuff, right? So this is the hard stuff. Obviously, it goes without saying that cheating is not tolerated. And for the most part, since the exams will be in person, most of us, I mean, the biggest forms of cheating would be like somebody sitting next to us, right? And so us accidentally sort of catching a look at their exam. That's a common one, right? That's kind of like eye wander. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm thinking, I kind of tend to sort of do the eye wander thing. I'm just kind of like, you know, kind of looking around. And then sometimes I don't even think about it. I'm kind of like, oh, darn, I just saw something, right? Now I've got an answer in my head. And so there's two things that happen there. Either it's like, oh, great, I got an answer, right? Don't do that. That's cheating, right? The other one is like, oh, crap, I just saw something. How can I unsee it, right? So now you're kind of like going through the spiral, because now you're thinking, it's like, wait a minute, am I a cheater now? Did he think I'm just cheating? I'm not that kind of person. Now you're kind of going in this guilt spiral, right? And that's wasting your time. So you should be focusing on the exam as opposed to sort of going through this whole guilt tornado. So in order to help you out in that particular sense, what I tend to do is I give you guys alternative versions of the exam, right? So if I'm sitting like right here and I can see your exam, I'll just Go ahead and copy it all down. I'll fail because she's not taking the same version of the exam that I am. Okay. So that kind of helps to inoculate you against that sort of neighbor to neighbor eye wander situation. The other ones are a little bit more flagrant. There's two flagrant ones that are absolutely no. First of all, the one thing you need to understand, academic integrity issues like cheating and plagiarism can be extremely aggressive, right? So they can go all the way to expulsion from the institution. That's one of the things that you can get expelled for. There's not a lot of things you can do in college you get expelled for, but that's one of them, right? I think probably some of the protests pushed that limit a little bit when they started doing vandalism and things like that to some of the buildings. But even then, right, there was a lot of grace given there. I think there were some suspensions that went out initially, and I think they pulled those back, right? So you can do a lot in college and get away with it. This is not one of them, right? Cheating and plagiarism is basically like doing a swan dive off of a tall building, academically speaking, okay? It's incredibly destructive. And so here's the two flagrant ones. Typically speaking, I'm a big technophile, not a technophobe, right? I believe in the 21st century. I believe in leveraging your technology at all points while you're learning the material. But when it comes to exam time, it is Stone Age, right? Electricity has not been invented yet. It's just you, your pencil, and your brain and the question. That's it, right? So now, typically speaking, oftentimes what will happen is you have one of these guys out. And so if you happen to be sort of sitting there quietly with this in your lap, it's very easy, I know some of you guys are very good at this, to Google an answer quite quickly. If I see something like that, it's over. Usually speaking, what will happen is I'll come up behind you, grab your exam, and I'll say, you got a 0, you're done for the night. Bye. At that point, there's no negotiation. There's no conversation because it gets worse from there. Because what I'm doing typically is I'm doing you a favor. By just saying that it's only going to be a 0 on the exam, I'm doing you a favor. Typically speaking, we have to report academic integrity to the provost. And the provost keep track of that. And that follows you wherever you go. So when you're looking at getting into that very coveted health program, guess what's following you around? It's an easy decision for the admissions people. When you're trying to apply to them, they see you in your dark cloud coming over you because you got a reputation as a cheater. It's going to make your life very difficult to be able to function. It's not worth it. We all want a competitive edge, but that is not the way to do it, right? That's like trying to win a race by making yourself lighter so you can run faster. But your solution to that is to cut your foot off. How's that going to work for you? Are you going to be able to run faster with one foot? Yeah. So basically what you did is you just annihilated your ability to compete, didn't you? That's exactly what cheating does to you. In your efforts to gain an advantage, you actually annihilate your ability to compete. That's what happens. The other big one that I oftentimes see, and this is one we have to be careful with, especially during like lab exams in particular, is leaving the room during an exam. Now, oftentimes, I don't want to like be a grade school teacher, but we're all adults and we all need to manage our bladders. That sounds really kind of dumb, doesn't it? You're like, seriously? You're talking about potty management? Yeah, I am. Because there's a lot of students who think that it's okay to just say, you know, I got to go to the bathroom. You're in the middle of an exam. No. It's only going to be an hour and 15 minutes for a lecture exam. How about no? Right? Because the problem with this is, and there's a big problem with this, it's happened actually quite a bit. You go to the bathroom, and I'm usually easy that way. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to make you just sit here and just puddle right there in your chair. I mean, that's not my goal, right? That's dumb, right? But the idea is you go to the restroom, and it takes 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And then one of the other students finishes, and they go in there, And oftentimes they'll come back and they're like, so-and-so is in there Googling answers in the bathroom. I just saw them. You know, that puts me in a very difficult position, doesn't it? It's not like I can go storm down the hallway, blast into the ladies' room, or the men's room for that matter, and say like, give me your phone. That can't happen, right? So what ends up happening? I wait till you get back. And by that time, you've kind of already put yourself together and you kind of covered all your tracks by that time, didn't you? And you just kind of nonchalantly sneak back into the room like nothing happened, all cool as a cucumber, thinking you pulled it over me. No. So first of all, do your best not to need to leave this room. When I was at UC Davis, and a lot of 4-years do this, if you left the room during an exam, you were done. For whatever reason, doesn't matter. The second they had a locked door policy. If you were late, you're not getting in. Doesn't matter if you're beating on the door. They'll call security and they'll haul you off. If you left the room, you were done. The door locked behind you. So it was an ordeal to like plan. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was a student, I remember doing this because I'm a coffee drinker and coffee is a potent diuretic, right? You drink too much coffee and you're going like every 15 minutes, a lot faster than you would if you didn't drink coffee. That's for sure, right? So I remember because I had night classes and UC Davis would have 2-3 hour exams. And I would actually have to strategize. I would have to okay, I got to cut off my coffee consumption at this point, and then I'm going to go to the bathroom every 30 minutes. Here, I literally had to program it out so that the caffeine was out of my system. So that when I sat down to, this sounds stupid, isn't it? So that when that's like, whoa, dude, TMI, right? So when I sat down to the exam, I knew that I wasn't going to have that diuretic effect. I was going to be able to sit there comfortably for 2 to 3 hours because I knew that if I had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the exam, I was screwed. Okay. So I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not going to lock the door behind you, right? Obviously, if you got to go, you got to go. I don't want you to sit here and have, bad things happen. That's not the case. However, when you do go, I want evidence that your digital life is here in this room. Okay. And you've got a time limit. 10 minutes, I think, is more than enough. If you're not back in 10 minutes, you're effectively done with the exam. I pick it up and I just grade it from there. Okay. I think that's a fair compromise between the indefinite time period. Now, granted, there are some students who have various health situations where they got, different issues. If you do, let me know that there's a situation so that I'm not unfair about that. That's a different situation. That's not the same situation. Okay. But that's something that I want to make sure that I do right by. Okay. Cell phones, basically, when you take a look at cell phones, try to keep them off as best as you can. Keep them quiet. If they start getting a little too noisy, then just turn them off or silence them. I generally don't tell people to turn their phones off, because I know that for our phones, that's a lot of times our lifeline to our family, to our kids, to our parents or whatever. And so we kind of need that up and running. That's just the way the 21st century is. I know it can be irritating to some people, but that kind of instant communication is just part of life. That's the way life is in the 21st century. Just keep it quiet. And in the lab, it's fine. If you need to go talk to somebody, just kind of step out in the hallway and take care of whatever you need to take care of, and you'll be good. The other one is respect. So we're all adults. So as long as we treat each other well, and we treat each other with respect, that usually goes well. And so just kind of be kind to each other, respect each other, and usually everything goes well. Attendance is required. So attendance is taken at the beginning of every class. And I do record it. Now, it's not necessarily you don't really have this. I'm going to take this back actually as soon as I say it, but but I don't like, say it's like, okay, you're not here, there's -5 points or something like that, right? I don't do something like that. That's pretty high school. I don't like that. I don't teach at high school for a reason, because I can't teach in high school without chloroform. And typically parents don't like that when you start chloroforming their kids. It's usually frowned upon in most societies. But the idea is, I do take it because we have to report it, right? Because like if you get a failing grade at the end of the semester, we have to report when your last attendance was by federal requirement. So we do have to keep track of attendance. But for me, attendance is required because if you're not here, then you're not going to be able to function in the class. You're not going to be able to perform in the class on the exams. You're not going to be able to do well. There is a direct correlation between attendance and success in a class. So attendance is required. For exams, if you miss an exam, then you need to let me know what's going on. Especially for an exam, if you're missing something, or if you're going to be absent, I would appreciate that you just let me know. It's like, hey, I'm not going to make it. Work is making me work, 24/7, 365 right now. I can't get there. I understand those sorts of things. We all have busy schedules and lives, especially if we're taking an evening class. That usually means we've already had a full day before we even show up here. And I understand things like that happen. Just keep me in the loop. Just keep me in the know. So I know that there's a situation going on, and I know you're just not deadbeat, right? So you're just not, just disappearing and then going to try to come back after a long period of absence and say like, oh yeah, by the way, can I make up all that stuff I just missed? I'm like, no, where were you? Right? I mean, let us know, communicate. Let me know as soon as something's going on so that I know that there's a situation. That way I can start thinking about how to manage it and how to work around the course load, how to kind of keep you up to speed and make sure you don't fall too far behind and those sorts of things. Okay. Otherwise, it makes it almost impossible. If you're obviously absent because you're sick, just let me know that you're sick. I have absolutely no desire for you to crawl in here half dead because you're sick and you want to kind of, you want to kind of crawl in. Don't do that, right? Just stay home. Don't come in here. We don't want to spread the sickness. We don't want to spread flu in particular. Okay. As well as any other thing. So if something's going on, just let me know. Obviously you can't text me because the one thing I don't do is I never use personal contact info. So you will never hear from me from my cell phone or from my personal emails. It will always be through official channels, either through the phone number that I listed, or it will be through the email that I listed, or through Canvas. So it'll be through some sort of an official outlet. Okay, so that's why I say email is the best way to go. Or Canvas, I get those emailed to me as well. So any kind of a message you put in Canvas will be emailed to me. So I see that one as well. Okay. So if you have a religious holiday that you need to observe, let me know. These do come up from time to time. And so that way we can kind of work around that and kind of make sure that you kind of stay plugged in and still be able to observe your religious holiday. So that's something that you also want to make sure. Okay, a couple of different tips. This is kind of coming more from the department. AMP1 generally and generally and AMP1 specifically has a reputation, right? So the AMP courses oftentimes have reputations for being, well, pretty challenging. And they are very challenging. They're very demanding because there's a ton of information coming at you. Anybody who remembers, if you didn't repress those memories already, going through 1080 and the landslide of information that came at you, it may have felt like academically you were drowning at times because you were just swallowing so much academic water. Well, there's still a lot more coming, right? So AMP, there's a ton of information that comes at you very quickly. And so there's just a big volume. So it's a very demanding sort of a thing. Okay. Now we try to sort of spread things out a little bit so that you can digest it a bit more and kind of be able to manage it a little bit more. We try the best we can, but oftentimes it's still a lot. So it's still very challenging. And so one of the things that you want to try to adopt is good study skills. Also, I'm a big proponent of working together. When I was in college, I was always the lone wolf type. I did my own thing. And I was one of those kids that did just well enough to where I didn't really need anybody else. Any lone wolfers in here? You just like to study on your own? Well, when I got to UC Davis, I realized that wasn't possible because the lone wolves basically get picked off by the predators. That's what happens. So there is safety in numbers, right? And so I realized that when I worked in groups, I was able to learn a lot more by far than I did by myself. And that's because oftentimes we are social learners, whether we want to admit it or not, whether we kind of embrace our antisocialness or introversion. We are social learners. We learn better together than we do apart because we're able to sort of bounce things off. There's just some sort of a visceral connection between individuals. So I strongly encourage you to form study groups with each other and to kind of create like a little survival group. Oftentimes those groups tend to work very, very well. Most of my study groups and most of my classes tend to do very well because they're kind of all filling a particular niche in their student profile, and they basically will attack up any problem or any concept and they'll just destroy it. I mean, and when one understands it, they explain it to the other, and then they get it, and they explain to somebody else, and then they all just basically they just ace the exam. I mean, just they do really, really well. Okay. So consider that. So do a lot of that. Oftentimes also, and I'll have a couple of these as well. So as it's hard to talk about study strategies unless we're actually in the middle of a strategy or in the middle of a chapter, because each individual chapter has kind of sometimes a very specific way of going about it. But one thing that you do want to leverage is the fact that human beings in general, sight is our strongest sense. And as a result, we tend to be very visual learners. And so, and if you don't believe that, just take a look at anything around you. If somebody wants you to buy something, what they do is they put some sort of a visual in front of you. Some of the apps that we're attracted to the most are the most visually pleasing to us. So we are hugely attracted to visual stimulus. And so when we get into some chapters have great visual aids and things like that for us to be able to understand and to sort of categorize and break down the information. And so when we run into those, I try to point those out as we go to kind of highlight that so that you guys know it's like, oh, I probably need to use this as a study strategy. Okay. The other big study strategy that we have is indexing knowledge. Whenever you have a ton of stuff coming at you at once, right, a lot of information, one of the reasons why science in particular feels so difficult is because everything's coming at you all at once. And it's like you're trying to hold all this together, and it's like you don't know how to do that. And your brain is having a hard time accessing all this information. So one of the things that you want to do is you want to come up with a strategy to organize and index all the information that you have. And there's multiple strategies to index that information as it comes to you. What indexing your information does is it allows your brain an easier, more organized way to access particular packets of information, making it easier for you to recall, and thereby easier for you to do more successfully on an exam. Okay. So whenever you get lots of information, indexing strategies, probably the most common one that you are familiar with is probably outlining. That's a common indexing strategy. That's a key strategy when you have a ton of information coming at you at once. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do. We try to set up a lot of resources for you. For instance, the lecture videos are a resource for you for studying. Study groups, that is a resource for you to study. Practice questions and things like that. On Connect, whenever you do an assignment, the first time you do it, it's for points, but you can redo it for practice. And so that's a help for you to study. So the Connect is actually helpful in that sense. Now, here's what you can find on Connect. On Connect, what you're going to see is you're going to basically see what's called smart book assignments. And so these smart book assignments are adaptive learning assignments. And so the expectation is that you guys are reading the chapter. That's the expectation both of the department and also of the Connect platform as well. And so the idea is you read through the chapter, we go through the PowerPoint so we can kind of dice that up a little bit. Our PowerPoints are essentially the study guide for the chapter, sort of helping you to sharpen what is and what isn't the points of emphasis in that particular chapter. And so the idea is that you've done some reading, you've done some studying through the lectures, and then you go through the Smart Book assignment, which is an adaptive learning assignment. So what the Smart Book assignment does is it basically assumes that you have read the chapter and you've studied through it a little bit, and it asks you a bunch of questions. Now, the questions that you get right, it just basically lets those go. What it does is it focuses on the questions you get wrong, and it keeps drilling you on those. The idea being that it's intending for you to go back into the chapter reading or into the lecture and to go back over that section that you're getting wrong. The idea being you go back there, you learn the material, you kind of turn the corner on the topics. You're like, oh yeah, I think I understand that now, right? And then you go back to the Smart Book assignment, then you answer the question correctly, and then it lets that one go and you move on and you just knock down each of those, right? So ultimately, it is based on completion. You finish the process, you get the points, okay? And so it's intended to be a study aid as you're preparing for the exams themselves. Now, for the exams, we're going to basically have, I guess you can call it 3 lecture exams and 1 final exam. I guess that's one way to put it. I just think of it as 4 exams, each worth 100 points. Our documented excuse for those policy holds play. If you can't make it to an exam, let me know, so that we can make sure we manage that situation. So your Smart Book assignments are intended for you to basically prepare for the exams, and then you'll be taking the exams themselves. As a result, the due dates that you'll see in Connect typically are associated with our exam cycles. So for instance, we'll take an exam on a Tuesday in-house right before lab. Oftentimes, I'll probably make the due dates due on that Friday of that week. That way, it gives you a few extra days to kind of tie up some loose ends and make sure you kind of get it all straightened out. But it's going to be basically the chapters that we cover on that particular exam itself. Okay, so that's what's going to be due that Friday. And so that's how those due dates are going to work. We will have 3 lab exams. Each of them is going to be 50 points apiece. And there are going to be some times when we're going to have a lecture exam and a lab exam on the same night. So 2 of the 4 exams are going to be that way. It's going to be just one long exam night. Since we're in the same room, oftentimes what I will do is I will oftentimes have you guys, I'll have the exam set up, the lab exam set up in this room. And I'll oftentimes just, give you guys one exam. And when you guys want the lecture exam, I'll give it to you. Okay. One of the things I oftentimes do is you don't have to turn in a lab exam. You can turn them both in at the same time. Okay. Now, the reason why I do that is because oftentimes I notice that when students are doing the lecture exam, they're like, oh yeah, wait a minute. Then something clicks in your head for the lab exam. You're like, oh, wait a minute. I want to go change that answer. And so that's why I don't take them until you're done with both of them at the end. That way, if something does click before you're at the end of the night, then you can still make that change because you still have the lab exam. Does that make sense? We'll talk more about that as we get closer to that. But those are going to basically be set up here. They are practical, which means there's going to be, stations and things like that. You may remember the 1090 lab exam. It's going to be very similar to that, only it's going to be anatomy and physiology stuff as well. So our grading policy, basically, it's going to be a traditional grade policy. You just basically take the number of points earned divided by your total attempted, and that's going to be your percentage. The percentage is already going to be there on Canvas. Typically speaking, when students are trying to estimate their grade, I always tell them use the percentage that you see on Canvas and the percentage that you see on Connect, because Connect actually has its own grade book where you'll be able to see what that looks like. And you'll be able to get kind of a rough estimate of where the final grade is. Okay. So grading scale is kind of traditional a little bit. but the D range is 57 to 69.9, so it's a little bit bigger than normal. And so everything else is mostly the same after that. Typically, if you're within 0.5%, I will round up. So for instance, you know, if you're like if you're 69.45, that'll round up to a 70. Okay, because the 5 rounds up the 4 to a 5, which is 0.5% away. Okay, now here's the thing. Generally speaking, Metro does do the whole A minus, C plus, C minus, and things like that. For the most part, most of the time, you might want to make a note of this. I only use A, B, C, D, and F. The only time that I use one of the either plus or minuses is when it rounds up. So for instance, if you get a C, then that means you got a legit C, you earned it. If I have to round you up to it, then that will be a C minus because you actually didn't earn that one. You just got a little bit of grace. Okay, that's the only time I will use like a C minus or a B minus or an A minus, is if you didn't actually get it on your own. I kind of had to sort of give you a little bit of a boost. Okay, so it's not fair for somebody who got an A, who earned it straight out. It's kind of unfair to them if somebody just kind of, if I kind of push somebody over to the A who didn't actually get it. Okay, that's the only time I use the minus. So we talked a little bit about missed exam. Obviously, if you have an exam that you missed, you need to talk to me before. Notice how before is in all caps. Talk to me about what's going on, why you missed it, when it's excused. So basically, when you want to do a makeup, we need to talk. Ideally, we want to do it within a few days after the original date. So that week, for instance, if we took an exam tonight, we want to make sure we get it done by Friday. But obviously different things are going on. There's different scenarios. So as long as we're sort of talking and managing a plan, you're still good. Okay. It's only if you're not saying anything to me that things start to go badly for you. Okay. Because if I don't hear anything from you, I assume you're just kind of being a deadbeat and you're going to try to play me. Right? You're going to try to come back and be like, oh, well, can I take that exam now? I'm like, no, where were you the last 2 weeks? No. Right? You were just kind of sandbagging me for the last 2 weeks. So no, you don't get that. Right? Now, if there's a situation going on, then absolutely. Right? But you need to let me know when that 2 weeks begins, not when it's 2 weeks on. Okay. So lab exams are the exception. Those can't be made up because they're practical. There's setup involved, a lot of logistics associated with that. Once those lab exams get torn down, they do not get put back up. So the lab exams, you want to absolutely try to make sure that you are here to get that. Okay. So that's one of those ones, those kind of fills it down. There's a lot of student support numbers. So Access Center, love the Access Center, Tutoring Center, which we have in Tivoli. So you can use those guys, Counseling Center, various other sorts of things. For campus closure and snow days, you can always call the number, but honestly, your best way to do that is through Rave Alert, right? Does everybody have Rave Alert? No? You need to. Metro probably has it on their site. I would just go into the Metro site, just the website, the student hub, and just search Rave Alert. Or you can go to the AHEC site and search Rave Alert. I think the police department has that there as well. And basically it's an automatic reminder. So like when something happens, like if there's a snow closure, you don't have to wonder and like call. It's like they'll automatically send you out the Rave Alert. They'll be like, campus is closed after 3. And they'll tell you what the instructions are. So all classes are remote, right? So they'll automatically send that out to you. Like when all the protests were happening, there's Rave Alerts going out like every day of saying like, okay, here's what the campus decision is. Campus is closed. You know, all systems are remote. Campus is closed. All systems are completely canceled. All classes are canceled. You know, it constantly sends that out to you, and you get those like immediately. Those go out way before anything else. Okay, so you'd want to get a hold of that. Some of the following days, and you can see these actually in the system. So September 4th is basically your last day to drop. That's called census day, basically. So that's your last day to drop with a full refund. Excuse me, 50% refund. August Metro does a little bit differently. So August 26th is full. The 1st of November is your withdrawal date. That'll give you a W on your record. So you should have a pretty good idea of how things are going by then. And so you can also double check on those. Those are on the class information as well. So that's all posted on that student, which is also posted on the module on Canvas. Okay. So this is going to be our lecture schedule. So you can see we're going to be doing chapter 1, the intro portion, and then so you can see the lab exercise we're going to be doing. So we're going to be doing histology tonight. And so we're already going to be getting into it. So we're going to do a little bit of lab safety and kind of orientation of everything. And then we're going to be doing histology as well and getting ourselves set up with histology. And then we're going to start rolling through the chapters, through tissues, skeletal system, typically the physiology, and then the anatomy. And then you can see the lecture exam for 1 is going to be in the same night as the lab exam for 1. I apologize. That's just the way the department wrote the lab schedule for this particular situation. On a Tuesday. Yep. So there'll be the exams will always be on a Tuesday because that's our in-person day. Normally I like to do them on the last day of the week, but since this is our in-person day, that's the day we're going to do it. For the exams, and so we just kind of roll through it. Now, one of the things I don't want you to do is, this is not an appointment with destiny. So for instance, when it comes to October 22nd, don't like put it into your appointment book. It's like, okay, October 20th, muscular system, chapter 10. We're going to do this, right? At least on the lecture topic side of it. For the labs, yes. For the lecture part, no. Because the lecture part, it's like an order of events. And so some of these things are going to expand and contract. Obviously, chapter 1 is already going to probably take a little bit, is going to fall behind because we spent we only have 1 day to cover an entire chapter. That's probably going to take a little bit longer than 1 day to do that. So not only that, but depending on the section, oftentimes there's expansion and contraction points, right? These are areas where we have to slow down in a chapter because we're struggling with it. We kind of have to wrap our heads around a little bit. Areas where we speed up in a chapter because we're like, we so got it, let's go, right? And so those expansion and contraction points are all different for each semester, for each student group. So even if I were to have 12 2310 sections, I would have probably 12 different expansion contraction patterns, okay? So that basically means that it's not going to be exact, right? This is an order of events, and the exam coverage is going to be associated with what we actually do, not necessarily this. This is kind of the ideal, but when we get closer to the exam, we'll say like, okay, the exam is going to cover up to this point, okay? And so that's usually something that we do for the exam itself. And so that is our calendar. So here we have it. The nuts and bolts in roughly a little less than an hour 15. Okay, so that's our witching hour because it's 6:16, a little over. So basically,